Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show.
Hello, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Tommy. Thank you very much. All right, we've got a kind of another packed hour again today. Some more great topics for you today. Today's topic will be around top-down and bottom-up DevOps. What we're going to try and talk about here is when you know you need to use DevOps in your organization, how does the business team or the people developing in Power BI, how do they communicate up to leadership that we should spend time learning DevOps? Like what are some of the gotchas here that we should be thinking about? And then also maybe your leadership and you want to employ or add DevOps to your teams, and they're not software development teams. They're in the business, right? So how do we communicate the value of what DevOps is doing to our organization? So we're just going to have some candid conversations around what we are hearing in these conversations and what we think works well and top down and bottom up.
Oh, yeah.
That being said, Tommy, let's go through a quick news items. I think you found an article here. Let's unpack it. What did you find for us, Tommy?
Oh, man. We're going to go from least coolest to coolest. I don't know. They're all cool, actually. This is really jam-packed news. So this is the first time I've seen for Fabric by Microsoft. There is MCP support for real-time intelligence. MCP is what's known as the model protocol or model context protocol. Yeah. And basically what that allows you to do is in your other tooling like Claude, or if you use like VS Code, but there more and more clients or IDEs are supporting it, basically allows your agent or whatever you're using that's using AI to basically get the context of that service. So for example, some really popular MCPs right now are like one's called thinking. So it makes your agent think before it does stuff. One keeps memory, and then others connect to services like Notion, GitHub. Now this one is by Microsoft, which allows you in any of your AI tooling that supports MCPs to simply execute KQL queries across it and be able to do some more plug and play. So that's pretty cool. It's the first instance for seeing that.
That's wild. I mean, I know the term MCP. I'm trying to figure out how this works a little bit. My understanding, Tommy, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, an MCP server is what you need. So, you're talking about there's a large language model that you're talking to, which is typically running on a machine or a service, has a series of APIs. Right. Then there's the MPC server, which is another machine or computer that's taking commands from the large language model and communicating with that to actual hardware. Right. And so I was watching a quick video yesterday of someone off of Y Combinator. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
Like a tech space or something like that. And he was saying, he was talking about his vision for AI and where AI is going. He goes, the newest, hottest programming language is now English. Your native language. I'm thinking to myself, maybe we've gotten to that level. Maybe we're not, we're no longer writing code for anyone at the lower levels of code. We're able just to talk to it in English, and that's how we're going to program and code computers moving forward. This is a really neat new world, and I think this MCP thing is starting to appear even in Microsoft tools. So this is going to be a trend, I think. I think we're going to hear a lot more about this.
I've been using them almost exclusively with anything I do with the vibe coding type of thing. But again, it supports Claude Desktop as well. So
excellent. Nice. All right. Sweet. Any other news items you'd want to cover off here before we jump in?
So Microsoft Fabric, they are just introducing a new item creation experience in Fabric. So whenever you want to create a new artifact, there's a lot to choose from. Maybe you're not sure if you're in the right workspace or in the folder, and everything gets cluttered. So this new item creation experience, simply just a UI, is supposed to pinpoint those pain points head on. Basically, what it allows you to do is create new items with fewer clicks. You can select the destination workspace and folder from that new creation experience, and you can assign it a task within your workspace. So
yeah, I think this is kind of letting people encourage them to use folders and task flows. Honestly, I don't feel task flows are too valuable to me. It's very, fictitious, or again, it's useful for like the first couple times you use it, but I don't really feel like I love it. Of the two items, I really like folders. Folders seems to be a lot better, especially when the Workspace gets very disorganized with lots of things in it. I really like the folders experience. I think folders makes a lot of sense here. And the new dialog box, anything you can do to make it easier for me to create an item. And I think honestly, all items, no matter what it is, should adhere to this new experience. It should just be the same.
Jeez.
Like one of the things that bothers me right now is like I make a data flow. It just makes a data flow and just gives it like data flow 1.
Data flow.
If I click data flow and if I click a notebook or something else, I want it to like kind of just force me, give it a name, tell me where it goes, and then just use the name I give it. So that way every experience, no matter what I'm creating in Fabric, has the same, entry folder experience. And I think that makes a lot of sense here. They're polishing some things here that need to be done.
I absolutely love it. So I'm not sure if that's rolled out as of yet. It's saying we're going to roll this out, but they didn't give a time frame.
Yeah, it's just kind of just noting that it's coming, and they didn't say it's actually here yet. There is a little animation here that shows you the new dialog box where you can kind of pick. You could pick a different workspace. You can pick the name. I think you can even add sensitivity labels to things as well potentially here. So there's just going to be a better way of creating content. I still think the whole add new item experience is kind of clunky with all of the. So here, I'll just say one thing, Tommy. Recently, I've abandoned all hope in the new item creation experience. I no longer favorite anything. And so I used to go through and favorite a couple of the items that I wanted to look at, but there's so many new things happening now. I hate the new item experience. It just drives me nuts. So I've unfavorited all of the items. I had like a lake house, I had a semantic model, I had a couple of things, but it was so annoying because every time I wanted to grab something that wasn't in my favorites, I had to go over to the other list, type in the name of the item I was looking for, and then go find it, or just scroll through an infinite long list of items here that I was going to create. I didn't like that. So now I have removed all of my favorites, and now I only have, so now when I click the new item, it goes right to the long list of everything. And then I can just type in what I'm looking for. Semantic model, notebook. So I find it's actually faster now to go type in what I'm looking for and then just go get the item from the full list, as opposed to trying to favorite anything, because it's just annoying to me. The whole experience is annoying.
I hate to say it. You know what I've been really utilizing? Bookmarks in my browser, because that's the best way to navigate. So for certain folders in a workspace, or even
interesting.
And like, because it's the same thing. I'm like, it's always a pain when I know I'm going to very frequent places. So I'm doing that for the folder location, which is
that's interesting.
I'm doing like some of my pipelines that I like to go through and refresh. And for the reports too, I'm just using a folder on my browser that has, I have right now the first 4 reports. Then I have a workspace location. Then I have, it's been so much easier.
That's actually really interesting, Tommy. That sounds like a feature that is missing in the product right now, because of things can get so buried in folders and in workspaces. One thing that I like saving my favorites for like reports and having some favorites there. Yeah. Can you favorite a folder?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm favoriting in my browser. I don't think you can favorite it in
like the UI doesn't actually give you that, right? Like, so again, I think the idea here is like I have lots of content across many Fabric workspaces potentially, and I want to get into a folder that's part of a singular workspace. So it almost feels like I should be able to favorite a folder, and then when I log in immediately on that homepage, here's the things you've recently interacted with. Here's a list of your favorited folders. Here's a list of your favorite reports. Like that, to me, I think that makes more sense on the home screen. I find the home screen on Power BI almost useless now. I don't think I use it for anything.
I completely agree.
I never, there's nothing that I do. I never log into Power BI, and I do nothing on the home screen anymore. The recommended cards are not useful. There's no pictures there. The recent items may be somewhat useful. Favorites is okay, but the whole front UI, I need more customization on that homepage. It just doesn't feel right. We've gotten to the point where there's too much stuff.
I agree. And I think they've been talking about doing the user interface for like the kind of like consumer user interface and an experience for more people building, but I have not seen that yet, because they have to be different. So for me as a builder, I don't really care what Jim looked at lately. So
no, the homepage doesn't suit. I don't like the recommended area. the simplified or expanded space. Neither one of them are just like, it's just not doing it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Last one here, Tom. You got maybe one more announcement?
Yes,
One more
and
news item?
just a little sentimental here. For the 18th consecutive year, Microsoft has been positioned as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for analytics and business intelligence platforms. Now, 18th year is a bit deceiving because, I mean, Power BI has been around for only 10, but it has been by far and away, for I know the last 6 at least, it's been the leader and the visionary, kind of like way as an outlier across all the ones. And you're looking at Tableau and Google and Quote, and it's just another time, including with Fabric, just to kind of stand alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right on that one, Tommy. I do agree. I think this Gartner space is not really good. I mean, it's really good for Microsoft, but like there's a little bit deceiving there because Microsoft has other BI products. It was SQL Server, SSRS, Excel, like whatever business intelligence products you had there. They've been participating in this game for a long time, which is great. Analysis services, wonderful, love it. It's been a very mature product over time. Totally enjoy that, having Microsoft be there. But you're right, Tommy. The last 10 years of this has been really Power BI, and now the last 2 more years of this has been Fabric. So the tools that we know and love that I think really move the needle here for organizations, those are the ones that are really making a difference. And I think Microsoft has clearly been pushing themselves further and further away in this Magic Quadrant. Microsoft is not allowed to do it, but you can usually find someone on the internet who's animated every single Gartner chart by position of the dots, and you can kind of watch where the dots move over time, and you can see their path. And one thing that's been happening that I think is kind of revealing here is in the BI space, Microsoft has taken off in the upper right-hand corner, and then Salesforce and Tableau has kind of really shrinked away from innovative and leading as much as Microsoft has. Another one that was a really big player, I think, was Domo for a bit, and then even ThoughtSpot was also kind of in there. But they've kind of also shrunk away compared to the competition.
Dude, I cannot tell you how many of these I tried to play with before in the past. Like when we were looking at different tools, there was one that was, I don't think it's even up there anymore, but the days. IBM had a shot, but I think that the biggest thing is they've been a leader in this and a visionary, and the white paper is great. You can download it for free. If you've never read one,
highly recommend it.
Really, really intense.
Very good reading for going to bed at night when you're really tired, just can't sleep. And
exactly. But I think one of the biggest things is they've been a leader and visionary since Power BI's days. You know, it's not just Fabric.
Yeah, which makes me feel confident that like putting us our knowledge, our experience into helping people learn Power BI is a good thing because Microsoft has continued building on it. They are considered the leader in the space. That's kind of the product you want to attach yourself to. I feel like I kind of lucked into this one, Tommy. I saw Power BI. I thought this is going to change the world. This is going to change how people do things. And I think I'm glad I leaned into that because I was like, oh man, a couple years into this, really doubling down on Power BI. Microsoft could have gone a different direction, and I could have been wasting my time on a product that they weren't going to continue to invest in. So for 10 years now, they've been heavily investing in this product, and it's made a career out of it for me, for sure.
1000%.
Awesome. All right. Well, I have one quick little note here. I just want to talk a little beat from the street here. So as one who creates a lot of content from YouTube's long form video, I have a really funny example, Tommy.
Okay.
I went on another podcast the other day, and on the other podcast I was with Armando. He runs the web podcast. He talks about web technologies, building your website for optimizing for marketing and ads. And one of the things that we talked about was we use a lot of like AI generated features from other tools to help us like make shorts and clips and other things from our long form videos. And I was joking with him and just talking about, well, when you use these, you upload your long form video, and then these AI tools, one of them being Opus Clip, one that we use, helps you chop that up and find like viral moments or things that were said in the conversation that were viral moments. And Tommy, I gotta be honest with you, I'm not sure if I'm making more viral moments or the AI is training me to talk in more viral moments.
What are you
So
talking about?
let me give you what I'm thinking here. When these AIs read or listen to the podcast, they take a transcript and then they score these little clips or these hooks in the video and say, this hook, this segment that you said has this, virality to the comments. Like this could go viral, right? And it gives you a score, 0 to 100. How much the AI thinks this is a hook, a good hook that people will want to listen to. Tommy, we've been doing just the podcast forever, and we've only incorporated the tools here recently. And so as I was talking with Armando, he's like, well, in past podcast episodes, he's had, and he uses a different program called Riverside to broadcast. He said, I've only had 4 or 5 video, viral clips made out of an hour or hour and a half podcast. That's it, 4 or 5. He goes, the podcast we did with you, the machine without extra prompting made 20 clips of viral moments.
Oh my gosh.
And so my joke here to him was I don't know, because I've been using Opus Clip for a bit. I've been processing the videos, pushing them out on the internet. So I'm looking at our conversations and I'm learning from the AI what makes a viral moment. What does that do? So the thing here is, I was joking with Armando. I said, maybe you should gauge the quality of your speakers by how many viral moments were made, right? Those are insightful pieces of information that were condensed down to a minute or less. Maybe that's what you should be. That's what it's doing. It's finding a thought that can be used in a minute or less. So the joke here was going, and then why this is funny to me is I was teasing with him and talking about this conversation, and I thought, well, wait a minute. I'm trying to do the podcast, but yet I'm editing the video using AI, and the AI is telling me what moments are viral or not, which then is probably informing me to actually make more viral moments because I'm using the AI to show me the viral video clips, but I'm editing the clips, which is training me, the user, to actually be more viral in what I speak about. It was I think I just had an inception. It hurts my brain. If I didn't use the AI to tell me what conversations were going to go viral or what video clips are going to go viral, then I wouldn't change how I talk and I wouldn't adjust what kind of content I make or how I make it. So I could be inadvertently right now being trained by the AI to change my behavior on the podcast to say things in a way that would go more viral. And then when the AI runs the video, it picks up on those moments.
Killing me, man.
When I got to this moment, I was like, I think my head's hurting. This is crazy. The AI is training me, but I'm giving it content so it trains on my stuff. It's this circular loop of wow, this could be a reinforcing, what do they call it? A control loop, right? We could be making a control loop between the AI and me and what I say and how the AI works and what's viral, what's not viral. Oh my word, this is crazy. Anyways, the only reason I bring that up is because there were some papers that came out recently from Microsoft talking about how AI is reducing the cognitive load on your brain when you do things. And so it's actually making you less you're not able to retain knowledge as much. There are some pretty large downsides to using AI. If you don't do all the technical details, like write a paper or something like that, you're not gaining the skill of critically thinking in a way that lets you write papers. So if you use AI to help you do things, it's taking away. It's like a use it or lose it kind of thing. That part of your brain muscle is not being worked because the AI is doing it, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. So there's just. This is interesting, Tommy. We're stepping into a very new world here. Anyways.
Wow.
Yeah, let's move on.
All right. Yeah. Okay. You're racking my brain, dude.
After that head scratcher, let's get into our main topic.
I think it's time to actually talk about Power BI and Fabric.
All right. Let's get into our main topic today. Do you hear that, Tommy?
I do hear that.
All right. We have another caller today. I would love to bring back to the podcast. Matthias, welcome back to the podcast. Speaking... Our AI DevOps genius is now here. Matthias is going to program us and how we think about DevOps a little bit more through this conversation. Welcome, Matthias.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited. We had a great chat a couple of days ago, so I'm looking forward to what's going to happen now.
So we kind of talked I guess it was on Tuesday. We talked a little bit about what DevOps is and what it is not. Actually, kind of more of the conversation of what it isn't, so we can kind of rule out some things. It's not a piece of software you go buy. But at the end of our conversation, we kind of start talking about, well, where's the proven value? Where do things land? And what kind of conversations should our organization have around DevOps, the methodology, right? And then what does that look like? And maybe how do we roll this out and implement it for our teams? Tommy, is there any other kind of topics or questions we should maybe frame this conversation out with and start with?
No, I think the biggest thing is that selling point, right? Where you don't want to try this in a vacuum individually, right? And start making all your workspaces Git, and that's your process at an organization that's never done that before, especially that you're going to be siloed. So for me, I want to talk about today that initial step of really bringing that to your team or your organization and getting everyone's feet, their first toe in, where they're not overwhelmed, but they actually see the value as well.
I think that's a great starting point. So Matthias, give us kind of some conversation here. So there's kind of like two approaches here. We're talking a little bit like top down, leadership level understands it and my team doesn't do it. And then we have another approach here from like the bottom up approach, where the team says, look, we're having struggles getting content out the door. We need a better way. And I think a lot of conversations I'm involved in, I think I'm a lot more involved in the bottom up approach, honestly. I think I'm having a lot more conversation with like the technical teams that are building the content. And they're asking me as a consultant or talking to me about like, hey, look, should we just turn on Git on the workspace? Can we just do that? Like, but our team's not comfortable with it yet. How do we get our team comfortable with this? We think Microsoft is touting this as CI/CD. We need to be using these artifacts. Now that Data Flows Gen 2 is supported, we think we should be using it. How do we get started? So let me kick it over to you, Matthias. What kind of conversations are you having more frequently here? And are there certain talking points we should be thinking about when we talk to bottom up or top down approaches?
Yeah, good questions and huge questions, right? Where do we start? I think a lot of what we discussed Tuesday was around culture, right? DevOps is not
culture.
It's not software. It's not technologies. It's not a product you buy. It's all about organizational setup and patterns, right? And Tommy just said it. DevOps is the opposite of doing things in isolation, right? DevOps is the opposite of small, tiny teams fighting each other. DevOps is all about communication, collaboration. So in a way, you started off with, how do we bring it down from the top as opposed to how do we bring it up from the bottom? In a way, the former is much easier, right? In an ideal world, you would actually have the top of your organization push the DevOps approach all the way down, right?
Yes.
Because ultimately that's what's needed. I appreciate this is all very theoretical and abstract. So let me give you a few specific things here. Stuff that, in fact, I've implemented myself in the past. I also mentioned cross-functional teams when we talked last time. I think that's really, really key. It's particularly, we're in a data space, which is ultimately all about delivering insights and value to more or less the top of a company. You cannot produce those kinds of insights if you've got some sort of engineering team tucked away in the basement, sitting there, detached from the rest of the business. So one thing I would really want to stress here is think about how can you embed your engineers into the department where they're supposed to deliver insight. That would be one thing, right? So and really get away from traditional notion of having IT and ops and sales and or finance, all sort of being their separate slices. So one thing which I've done previously was to basically think of data of dashboards and reports, etc., as products. which we deliver internally, and then sort of put on the product hat as if you were as if you created a public product to be sold, which means customer focus is got to come first, right? You got to have a product manager. You got to have someone who is as closely embedded with the people ultimately using your stuff as possible. Bring a trainer in, invest in documentation, not documentation that's sort of very tech heavy and niche, but documentation that actually makes sense to your users. So those would be some specific ideas, but ultimately it's about embracing things like cultural change, breaking down barriers. Back to you.
I want to react a little bit to your embedding the engineers directly into your business teams. I had an experience in one team when I was working back in my corporate days, with a large Fortune 100 company, and we had a data. It was kind of like the IT team had like a data team. There was people that were touching the databases. At the time, we were using business objects, so there was a business object developer building universes and creating the data. And so one of the things that was very unique in that situation, the salary of the IT individual was paid for by the business. That person they had their report line was to an IT individual, but the salary was paid for by that business unit because they had so many data needs. So that what that meant is that yes, that person had to adhere to all the IT standards of things or what IT was doing. They kind of had to make sure that they were doing things in a secure way, not following IT practices and principles, but that user sat inside the business. So this was a commitment that was made by the business. Said, look, we had data problems. We need help getting data things done. The IT organization is doing their own thing. They're getting things done fine, but there's not a resource that's directly allocated. Our projects were coming in, they were getting shifted around to multiple people. You had other initiatives like we're redoing the ERP system, right? So they had their own priorities, right? So they're like, we don't have budget to get your business stuff, their business data done. And so the business kept doing a lot of work in Excel. So they're like, we need someone to be a voice, an advocate. Again, to your point, embedding your engineer. We did that. We physically had that person sit on our team in our row, and then we worked with them directly to build all the tables, and it made a huge improvement. All the needs of the business could be funneled down to this one person. We could have better timelines. They were dedicated on the work that we needed to get done. And then that way we weren't always struggling with, okay, we'll add it to the backlog. Where does that item sit in the large list of items? Because everyone's need, when it's just your team or your department, your need is always number one priority. I need it now to get it done so I can do data things. Well, if IT is then pulling that resource away to do other stuff, you kind of lose that resource and you're forced to find workarounds to work with your data. So I personally experienced this and felt, honestly, this was a really useful and impactful way of leveraging let's call it the data engineering team and sitting them closer to where the business intelligence was being developed. Tommy, any reactions to embedding your engineers?
Especially when you talk about the team structure, team organization, because I'm really intrigued about the bottom-up approach when we're going to talk about this, because it's happened to myself where everything was great, everything was dandy, we had the right connections, and then someone came and said, we're going to reorg, we're going to remove everyone, and it's amazing how much that broke process and also the quality. And especially in this conversation, when you're dealing with something so, again, I will say it, the assumption is so dev tech heavy, that's probably not going to come from the top down to say, all right, you guys are going to start using Git, because here's the thing though, as much as I love it and I'm using it, it's not a global best practice right now for BI teams, right? It's not like a prerequisite to do source control or to do DevOps at all. or some organizations do it, but it's not like you go into an enterprise software team and you've never heard of Git and you get laughed out of there. That's not going to happen in our space. So we have this service right now, or this process methodology that is not a kind of global stamp in our industry yet. We're all seeing the value. So it's probably going to happen more bottom up. So I want to kind of hear about that grassroots appeal or the work there, because that, like I said, this is not you. I imagine you ask 100 people doing Fabric or Power BI right now, how much of them have heard of GitHub? How much of them have heard of DevOps or have done it? So that's where I'm going from. So it really has to come from the people who are passionate about it.
And Tommy, I'm not going to try to like debate you on your history here, because you've learned what you've learned. You've gone through these experiences. You've said these things, but as I think about what DevOps is doing and like the culture of that process, right? Again, Matthias, we kind of were talking about that a bit yesterday. I would really hope that shifting my people around or moving people in my organization should not impact my process. And I would argue if the act of moving people around in your organization breaks the methods by which you're able to produce content, you don't really have DevOps in place. It was relying too heavily on the people, and there wasn't actually a robust process under the hood. I would think, and this is part of the reason why I think we're talking DevOps here to some degree, is, again, Matthias is maybe thinking, I think he's going to disagree with me here, but I would hope that the DevOps process would be able to stand a shift in individuals underneath of it. And so we have documented patterns. We have, this is how we do things. This is what the tech, this is how we integrate the technology into what we do in order to produce content. And whether the reorg happens or not, that process, I would think, should remain relatively the same in order to develop quality products. Maybe your reaction there, Matthias, and then maybe we can go into like the grassroots side of things.
Well, introducing or implementing DevOps is not something you're going to get for free and overnight, right? Okay, coming back to the question, how do you go about it, and how do I convince people? I think there are two completely separate buckets to look at here. One is my fellow engineers don't believe in Git, or my fellow engineers have nothing automated. They're happy, pushing buttons and doing everything in a manual way, right? So that's one challenge, but it's very different from from actually believing into the sort of the bigger picture of DevOps, which is all about agile delivery and continuous improvement, and wanting to bring this into your organization bottom up, right? So we need to, I think both of them are really important, but we need to talk about them differently. Which one do you want to tackle first? Shall we do the former, the tech internal? How do I convince my report developers that Git is a good thing?
Let's start there. I think that's Tommy. I think Tommy wants to start with like the grassroots perspective. How do we get the developers on? And I think one story that I have found that works really well here is, did you need a backup? Have you ever, I start presenting problems. Have you ever done, and then you kind of enter have you ever deployed a report where it was on the wrong page? You added extra filters in the filter pane and you weren't supposed to, and you had to like quickly revert the report or edit something. Have you ever done that before? And have you ever had someone overwrite your changes after you made a day worth of work? Have you ever lost work because you're using SharePoint as a versioning tool and you can't merge the changes back together? I think that's usually some of those conversations I start. Everyone's like, oh yeah, I see nodding of heads. People have done it. It has happened. And I think that's one of the pieces that I use is like, okay, there's a better way to develop than using this, again, this is a culture thing here. We're trying to get people have been very well trained to use SharePoint as their backup site for PBIX files. I think there's a better way now. And I think the Git integration is something we should embrace and train our teams on. Sorry, Matthias, what do you think?
I mean, one thing we do have to acknowledge, sadly, is that there's a price here in terms of upskilling, people changing habits, people having to be convinced to work in different ways, right? So, that's always going to be problematic. And I'm just going to be very open about it. So you've got two ways of going about that, right? You can move to another organization that's already converted, or
Sure.
you can do the legwork to convince people, right? Well, maybe a way to achieve that is to let them fail, right? To let them experience themselves all the drawbacks of not having source control, not having automated processes, not having automated testing in place, right? Let people get to the point themselves where they think there's got to be a better way here, right? Rather than trying to force everyone, either you learn Git or you're out of the door, right? That's not going to work, because ultimately, it only works if everyone's fully on it. So,
but I think
you want to pay sort of an alternative picture, in which lots of today's problems don't exist anymore. And you mentioned things like having chaos around different versions, not knowing what's the latest in production, having to stay late on a Friday because you pushed a new report and suddenly everything broke. There should be lots of in fact, you remember I mentioned the Phoenix Project, the book,
yes,
a couple of days ago. If you need examples for that, read the book. This is what it's all about, right? It's pretty much showing you in a very nice and readable way, how businesses fail because they don't actually embrace those practices. So that would be one suggestion.
And I want to just tag on there, Tommy. I want your opinion on this one too. I think you have to be a savvy leader to be able to do this, right? So I think when you say let them fail, I'm on board. I'm okay with that. I'm like, there's going to be times where someone's late on a Friday. We need to fix a semantic model. Like, these issues are going to happen. But I think as the leader in this situation, I need to be mindful of that. And when these occur, have a little birdie in their ear that says, you know what, there might be a better way for this. I think if we looked at, and so I feel like there's a little bit of like you need to be mindful that the failures will happen. When the failures do occur, and you as a leader step in and say, okay, Tommy, I need you to work a little bit later. The semantic model's down. The sales team can't get the numbers. Can you help me out here? And while, Tommy, you're doing the extra effort and you're experiencing the pain that we're eventually going to try and reduce, as the leader, you also, after this, a moment here, take the opportunity to kind of voice some, there's probably a better way we should be doing this, right? We should probably be thinking about Git. And then the engineer's like, yeah, that was not fun. I did not enjoy that. Git would probably solve this, or let's add some process to what we're doing here. And then you could start weaving in those conversations around DevOps and start seeding the idea even before you're really ready to make the time commitment, the tech debt, right? To really just implement and go with it. Tommy, your reaction?
I like that, but this one's you make a good point. The only thing I would feel like there's a lot to introduce here. It's like, oh, what could have worked better here? A whole infrastructure solution from soup to nuts. Like, what part? I feel like I want to introduce some of the parts in pieces, right? Rather than the whole package of like, we're going to do source control. There's automated testing. Oh, it's great. And no, there's this idea with you work in development and then you have to publish it, but then I can check the changes. There's a lot to unpack there. And I feel like I would want to like take some of those pieces there and introduce them slowly, kind of things like, oh, you also like sesame chicken? And like, rather than saying we're going to go to the entire Chinese restaurant, like, well, we have rice. Rice is good.
Well, what would you start with, Tommy? Like, if this is too big to eat all at once, what's the easiest thing that in your mind, if the issue happens, problems arise, something? What do you start with?
I would go with the one that probably is the most frequent, and it's what we talked about on Tuesday, where it's a change that someone made. I have to go back and open up Power BI desktop, and what did you do, and what did I do? And you're just like, hey, I know this is going to sound like it's a developer thing. It's not. However, what if I told you that any change that any of the team made, you can revert to the line kind of thing, to the DAX measure without even opening a Power BI desktop, and you can revert each push kind of thing, and then just introduce that way. And
so you're basically talking, the first thing you're going to do is going to introduce the Git
source
control, basically.
I think that's the natural. To me, it's the natural place to start. But I'm happy to hear if there's maybe a better introduction too.
Well, I would be even more specific, right? So let's say we're in a Power BI world. That first step would be to move away from PBIX, right? Enable PBIP, enable PBI projects, and introduce everyone to this is effectively the same. The same output in terms of what you work on in desktop.
I like that.
But it looks different, and most importantly, it allows you to track your changes. Once you've done that, it's easy to go to the next step and think about a bit of CI/CD maybe, right?
I like that.
That's the sort of stuff you can then automate in terms of deployment. Once you've got that in place, you can think about having different environments. Once you've got that in place, you can think about doing parallel work by having feature branches. And then you can really convince your business, because you're going to be able to scale in terms of work and development, right? So the story writes itself almost. And you can start very easy, very simple, with tools that are there today. Going to PBIP is very easy. It's just save as in Power BI desktop. But it opens, a very long road of potential improvements.
One other note I feel like I've been fighting here recently is the resistance of the business to move away from SharePoint. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but Microsoft has done I feel like Microsoft has done a really good job of put all your files in SharePoint. That's how we version. That's how we bring in that content and keep snippets or versions of your reports. And I feel right now the conversation, even with leader level, right? Oh man, we need to move away from SharePoint. We got to embrace the PBIP format. They kind of know PBIP is the future, the way to go, but getting them to rethink, well, can I store all the PBIP files back in SharePoint? That's the question, right? And you're like, well, that solution's not really made for, to your point, Matthias, the direction we want to go, like different environments, parallel work with branching. Like the strategy should be move us more towards that direction. And we need to step a little bit more away from the SharePoint. And the number of times in conversations, well, that's what we do. That's how we store things. Yes, I understand. But we need to bring the team knowledge up a bit so that they understand the PBIP format. And I think that was really a good point. Like, that's so fundamental. Like, once we understand what PBIP is and the fact that the model and the report are a collection of files and they're not one big zip file, that's an aha moment for people right there. That to me, that's the fundamental. Without that, that's the keystone for the whole process. If you can't grasp that part, you might as well just ignore everything else. It's not going to be worth it, right? I mean, I feel like that's, and I think Microsoft is aggressively moving towards the PBIP format in everything. It's going to be everywhere shortly.
And there's a fantastic analogy here to the rest of Fabric, right? Because in a way, obviously, Fabric, meaning everything that's not Power BI, traditionally, you do everything in a browser, right?
Yes.
It's just UI and you click buttons. So in a way, the native Fabric experience is like the Power BI PBIX experience, in the sense that it's a black box. You don't really see what's happening when you do action A or action B. You can't really tell what's changed between version 1 and version 2. So the move from PBIX to PBIP in Power BI is in Fabric turning on Git integration and suddenly seeing all these JSON files that are behind your items and being able to see, you've changed your data flow, you made a commit and pushed it into Azure DevOps or GitHub, and suddenly you see there are a few lines of JSON that have actually changed, right? So that would be, I think, a perfect equivalent here, and again, pretty easy first step.
I like that analogy. And actually, I wrote this down. My suggestion here was, and as we were thinking about this, Matthias, I was kind of unpacking it a bit as well. The first step should be, let's replace SharePoint with workspace synchronization in Git. You don't need to see all the files. There's a nice, I really like that experience. The synchronization, and so let me caveat this with some things as well. I've had some people tell me the Git integration doesn't always work 100% right all the time, and they get into some weird scenarios every so often. So I've seen situations where it gets a bit off. However, what I would say though is, my experience has been here, just turning on Git integration to the workspace and then seeing items that are committed or not committed in the workspace is invaluable. That to me. So by doing this, I feel like I'm now comfortable letting teams build reports in the service if they want, right? To me, like I not maybe wouldn't love it, but that's one of the things I've been voicing this since, when Power BI came out. Never, ever let people build reports in the service, because you can't get it out. You can't download it. There's no way to get the information. Like if you screw it up, you have to rebuild. Like that was the mentality with building things in the web. Well, now with the Git integration, you're at least getting the parts of that report and everything's being stored. So now, yes, the workspace is having some changing of artifacts. They're, adopting or mutating over time as you build them and create them. But at least there's a timestamp where I can commit the changes using the UI. I'm not writing code. I'm just writing a commit message. Here's the message. Here's the item I changed. Save. And so I think starting with that mentality in replacing the SharePoint experience is an easy win. Like that should be a no-brainer. Yeah. We should be able to teach that. That's a good first step. And then once you've kind of gone there, you can go further down the environments, branching, all these other more elaborate things. But that's very fundamental to even getting things started. I love that. Very, very good.
So,
Tommy, you were going to say something.
No, I want to dive in. I cannot believe how quick time has gone. This has been great. So let's say we have a team set up in Git. We have our source control fabric set up, and things are going smoothly, right? But as we talked about Tuesday, that's a misconception that DevOps is just source control. So when does that next step kind of take place? Because obviously we could either dive into those pitfalls that would happen when people use source control and how to get people to really, gung-ho about Git. But at some point, right, there's also that, like, all right, we've been doing development prod, or in me and Mike's case, we just, push the main all the time. Kind of thing. But to start introducing,
I only work in production, Tommy.
I only work in main. I only work in master. Okay?
I only develop on main. I am the branch I am the main branch. Oh, I love it.
Oh, it's hilarious. But at some point, right, there's going to be this conversation like, all right, we're going to start talking about really more than just source control, because I think if you just stop there, it is fine. But you have added more steps to the process. There's a better quality, but you have not made it faster or at that point.
I would introduce something else first, actually. And earlier, when we were talking about educating people horizontally versus vertically within the business, as in, how do you get your peers on board, as opposed to how do you sort of get your receivers, your end users on board. If we just briefly focus on the latter for a bit, from my point of view, the key here is to introduce an issue tracker. something like Azure Boards or GitHub Actions, to basically say to the people who want the dashboards and the semantic models and the reports from you, you may have sent me Teams messages or emails previously if you wanted something. Why don't we formalize that a little bit? Why don't we actually put that in a piece of software where we actually track each request, and where we then have a regular meeting with you where we jointly prioritize what we're going to be working on, where you have full visibility about what's in our backlog. You have full visibility about how long it takes us to deliver that. And we have complete transparency around what you value in terms of your priorities. Once you've done that, and I'm coming back to your point, Tommy, now, then you can very neatly tie that into the Git world. Because if you then think about regular releases and planned releases and features that contribute to those releases, that actually maps to your branching model. That's how I would do it. Then I would say, well, we've got our main branch here. By definition, that's in production. Anything that's committed to main is in production. So whilst we work on new stuff, logically, we have to introduce a new branch. So why don't we then create a new branch every time we start a new sprint? And why don't we let every developer own their own branch whilst they work on their specific slice, and then integrate all of those branches into that release branch. And then ultimately, when everything's been signed off, that release branch is moved into main, right? So I think this is how you get, first of all, full circle, user request all the way to release into production. But this is also at the same time how you introduce a branching model to your developers, because you're not introducing branching for its own sake. You're introducing branching because it maps directly to what the business is actually asking for.
I like that very much. And this is one area that I think is a little bit clunky right now in the Fabric experience. So I agree with you, Matthias. I think the tracking issues, at least getting a list of things that you need to get done, right? Stuff that breaks. And that way you can, I think a lot of times we solve problems, but we don't actually know the history of like where the problem came from, what happened, what was the root cause, what was the issue, right? And so by having an issue tracker and being able to write down these items, we have a better feel, I guess, for some of these things. One of the things that I find just is kind of clunky today, and I think this is what, Matthias, you're probably trying to solve in your world as well with Navidata, is it's not always easy to get a branch from a main workspace created. And my issue, so I feel like Microsoft has done a good job of like creating the items, the physical items, like, oh, I'm going to take a branch from, we have our sales workspace, and then that's on the main branch. And then I'm trying to create something from that, a branch that's different where I want to modify something to report or change the semantic model. The items themselves seem to go along very well in Microsoft's processes. But what doesn't do very well is the data part. So I feel like what I'm doing right now in the ways that the way Microsoft has implemented these DevOps like processes is I have to take a copy of a workspace, make a whole brand new workspace for my branch, my testing, my changes, and then I have to run the compute again to go get the data so I can do the operations, because I'm going to bring all the content down, but I'm not actually going to bring the the data with it, right? And I feel like there's a really missed opportunity here. I'm going too deep here, so just bear with me. I really think there's a better way to do this, where I should be able to think about my workspace like an encyclopedia. And here's what I'm going to go with the analogy here. Every single item that I build in my workspace might have, so there's some items that depend on the lakehouse. There's data flows that are pushing data around in the lakehouse. But the data is already there. What if my change is on the report or the semantic model side? I don't need if I'm going to go look up the word, any word, zebra, I don't know, I'm just picking a letter. I can grab the Z's and go look through the encyclopedia. And then for all of our younger audience, these are books, and you would go get them from a shelf. There's not an encyclopedia in my house anymore, but like I go pick the thing that I want to go change. I want to go look up. I know what I'm looking for. I grab generally the area that I'm going to go change, pull that item. So I want to pull just the semantic model or just the report. And I want to remotely, while I'm doing my branch, I want to remotely connect back to the original semantic model. So like the semantic model needs to be a parameter that I can point back to main. I'm not going to change the semantic model. All I'm doing is modifying the report, or even more differently, right? It's a lake house, right? I have direct lake maybe enabled, right? I want to pull the semantic model down, still being pointed to the dev branch of the data, but then I can just work only on my little artifact separately, make my changes, update my measures, and then push that back into branch. And then when I push it back in, this is where the automation makes sense. It automatically recognizes, oh, you were working in a branch. You're actually trying to connect to this lake house that's supposed to be in the main branch. Oh, we'll just switch out that connection for you and then put the book back on the shelf. We replace the connection, and then now your change has been made to the semantic model, even though I actually physically have to change the connection between workspaces potentially. There's a whole data switching story here that I don't feel is very well developed from the Microsoft side. And I think this is where, Matthias, you're putting a lot of effort right now, and where the community at large is going to be building tooling around to make this easier. Does that make sense? Do you see the same thing? Or did I just totally derail this conversation and go on a random tangent here?
Well, so what you introduced actually is a new concept, the concept of environment. Which is different.
Sure. Yes.
Which is different from the concept of branch, right?
Yes.
So branches are cheap, right? You can have 1 million branches and create and destroy them, and it costs nothing. Environment in a data world, that's where the challenge is, because you need data, right? And so,
correct.
In an evolved DevOps setup, you're going to have environments. The most famous one being production, right? Sort of the sacred environment. But then you're going to have pre-production environments. Some of them are shared, some of them are individual, some of them are long-lived, some of them are ephemeral, as we say in the DevOps speech.
Yep.
Yes. And so this is ultimately where smart tooling comes in, and this, as you rightly say, this is precisely what we at Navigator focus on massively, because there aren't any good solutions in place today.
Agreed.
And so working with branches and working in a parallel and collaborative way introduces a new problem for data projects. You can solve that problem with a lot of manual effort, which is sort of what you're forced to do if you just work with sort of out-of-the-box Microsoft solutions today, or you use and then that's obviously a massive turnoff, right? Anything that's manual is completely against DevOps principles, or you find the right tooling to help you automate that kind of setup as much as possible. So those are the choices you've got today. But ultimately, you need to have a solution for that problem. You can't. There's no way to eliminate it. You have to address it.
Good way to think about that.
Yeah.
Tommy, let's maybe wrap up things here, but we've almost pushed everyone to about an hour now. We'll wrap up the time, that time of the podcast. Thank you all very much for listening. Matthias, this has been another great wealth of thinking and unpacking and talking about these challenges. We have some people over here on LinkedIn, which we can't see in the chat. People are commenting on the ability, the SharePoint safety blanket, right? That's kind of like a comment that's there. That's what we're used to using, and we maybe have to move away from our safety blanket into other places. Tommy, what would be maybe your final thoughts here? What would be your kind of wrap up here as you think about this conversation today?
I think you have to think in the long term, especially if you're in an organization that has not been introduced to this, or just does not perceive BI being part of DevOps, but I think there's a lot of sprinkles, and I think the biggest one is just the Fabric Git enablement and just starting there. What's going to happen naturally from that is someone has to take up the reins of understanding what DevOps is, or is that going to fail miserably. And so you're listening here, and it's going to be you, and understand some of the best practices and the methodologies and what you're actually trying to achieve that way. But just getting everyone getting comfortable with that initial step. There's that bit of that kind of, learning hump, but more just like, I don't know what these commits are. Once people are comfortable there, then the other concepts are going to come a lot more naturally.
Matthias, any kind of final thoughts as you wrap the conversation up here for you today?
Well, since you mentioned Git commits, I think moving forward, there's huge potential in terms of AI to help us creating good commits, and particularly good commit messages, and summarizing what we've done. Right. This is
Love that.
In the Git world today. This is one of the big issues that every developer, every engineer is struggling with to some degree. And it's easily something we can, at least to some degree, delegate to an AI. So, some of the tools I'm following are doing some great work in that space. So, this is definitely hope and a really good use of AI as well.
I think my final thought here kind of really centers around this idea of the SharePoint safety blanket, right? I really liked your idea or your concepts, Matthias. You're talking about when there are pain points from the top down side, leaders need to be mindful of tracking when issues occur, putting them in a place where we can kind of discuss and think about better ways of doing development. Really love the idea of the data as a product, right? We're building products, supporting products for organization. If we treat it as such, you're going to make your product better. You're going to figure out how to deliver it faster. These are the things, these are values and core values we want to instill in our team. So from the top down approach, I love that. Seeing when pain points occur, working with the team to instill or build out these new DevOps like processes, I think is definitely the right way to go. And then also from the bottom up approach, I really do subscribe to hey, we may not have all the details of environments, branching figured out at this point,
Right.
But at a minimum, it's not a lot of extra weight or work to just start with, move away from SharePoint. Let's turn on Git integration in our Fabric workspaces or premium. It's actually not just Fabric. It's premium per user, anything premium related. Premium per user, if you're paying per user, or any of the Fabric or P SKUs as well. Just turn on Git. Just see how that works for your team. And for some of your more mission critical workspaces, I think this is a no-brainer. This gives you the ability to roll back. Users can see when things are out of date and the definition of them have changed based on a standard Git integration. And the UI is simple. It's straightforward. This thing's different. Checking your change. No problem. But I think just that alone adds a lot of value to the team, especially when we're talking these simple things of, to your point, Tommy, a lot of people overwrite other people's changes accidentally. And when you have more people working on the same stuff, you're going to come into this place where you're going to have conflicts. Last one in wins only works in smaller teams. You need to think about this a little bit differently. So with that being said, wonderful discussion today. Lots of talk around top up, bottom down. Top down, bottom up. There we go. Got it right there. And just hopefully some good thoughts for your organization as you think about DevOps, as you think about building things and a more robust system, a better data product. Thank you for listening today. We really appreciate your ears. We know you could be doing a lot of other things, washing your hair, actually getting work done for once, going for a run, being active or something like anything else. But you choose to spend the time with us, and we are very grateful for your time. Thank you very much. Matthias, also, we appreciate your time as well. Thank you for spending a good old hour out of your day talking with us more about DevOps. More topics to come around this space. I think there's a lot more to unpack here. We start with a really good intention of talking through a lot of things in these podcasts, and the conversation just drifts and we get a lot of really good thoughts, but would not necessarily hit all of the topics. So we'll keep unpacking here as we go and teasing this out. Please be able to share this podcast if you like this one. We really appreciate you sharing the podcast as well. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. If you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode, head over to powerbi.tips/ podcast and leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.